Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're stepping straight out of the modern world and into the freezing, unforgiving stone of a 16th century Geneva clock tower. We're going to be unraveling a grim, mythic clash between human warmth and cold iron. This is a fascinating story about a relentless mechanical divinity facing off against the fragile, enduring nature of the human spirit. So, let's dive into this dark fable of gears, gods, and a truly profound philosophical divide. To kick things off, listen to this haunting question from Elara, the character known as the honest guest in our story. She asks, "Why does a path I have never walked already feel like home?" It's such a heavy question, right? She's standing in this cold, unfamiliar tower, and yet she's completely overwhelmed by a sensory memory of a life she's never actually lived. And this deep, unexplainable longing perfectly sets the stage to introduce us to the chilling philosophy of her counterpart, Sir Brain, the mechanical god.
All right, Section 1, the clock tower's dark fire. To really get this dialectic, we have to start with the engine driving this whole thing, Sir Brain's dark fire. His core doctrine here is something called absolute ice. Think of it as this unyielding, deterministic reality of rigid mechanical perfection. In this state, everything operates exactly as intended 100% of the time. It is completely stripped of human frailty, of aimless drift, or the unpredictable ability to dream. Imagine a system in your own life completely devoid of human error. It sounds perfect on paper until you realize it also eliminates the very essence of dreaming. It's cold, it's calculated, and it is absolute.
Moving right along to Section 2, Thesis, the Sublime Prison. We're looking at a classic Fichtean dialectic here, starting with the thesis, Sir Brain's absolute will. And this is laid out perfectly in the first two of the tower's 4 parables. First up is the pendulum. Its perfect, unhurried arc signifies total sovereignty over time. To Brain, time is literally kneeling to a mechanical heart that beats without any human fear of stopping. Then you have the second parable, the high gear train hidden in the darkness. This represents that absolute ice we just talked about. It relies on a tooth-on-tooth engagement so incredibly precise that even the slightest error would echo through the entire structure.
Because the mechanisms are just that flawless. The text says nothing was permitted to drift, nothing allowed to dream. This perfectly captures the tower as a sublime prison. Sure, it's sublime in its flawless execution, but it traps existence in this incredibly rigid framework. It entirely eliminates the beautiful, unpredictable chaos of human frailty. Elara hears the clean engagement of those gears and instantly understands that this perfection is ultimately a prison for the human soul.
Which brings us to our next part, Section 3, Antithesis, Mechanical Nostalgia.
Right up against that cold, rigid perfection is our antithesis, Elara's deeply human perspective. The source material calls this mechanical nostalgia, and it's fascinating. It's this paradoxical, persistent human hunger for a world totally empty of iron. For Elara, this nostalgia acts like an old, unhealed wound. She's dreaming of a morning filled only with ordinary human heat, of workshops with completely empty benches. She's desperately missing a life before gears and gods, even though she is currently trapped right in the middle of them.
So here's the massive disconnect. On one side, you have Sir Brain looking at the tower's mechanisms and seeing a sublime prison of perfection, a total triumph of absolute law. But on the flip side, Elara views her mechanical nostalgia not as a weakness, but as a gateway outward. Think about your own life for a second. Have you ever felt a sudden nostalgia for something simple and uncalculated when you're stuck in some highly rigid corporate system? That's exactly Elara's gateway outward. Her dream of ordinary human warmth is literally the only door left that leads outside the deterministic clockwork of Sir Brain's reality.
Let's see how this plays out in Section 4, the moral clash.
Now, this ideological divide totally erupts into a literal moral clash through the final 2 parables. We've got the striking mechanism and the tower's shadow. And as you can see, they represent completely different realities for our 2 characters. These aren't just polite disagreements. They are 2 fundamentally opposed ways of interpreting reality. Where Sir Brain sees glorious confirmation of his power, Elara sees profound horror. Take that third parable, the striking mechanism. For Elara, those massive hammers hanging over the great bells, that's latent violence. It feels to her like judgment suspended. But to Sir Brain, that exact same latent violence is an authoritative "thou shalt." It completely mirrors the commanding will he once used to turn a simple telegraph office into a center of total control. For him, it's just a glorious claim upon the hours themselves.
Then we get to the 4th parable, right at the summit, the tower's shadow stretching across the centuries. Looking at this timeline, Alara actually feels the shadow acting as a black gnomon. You know, the part of a sundial that casts the shadow? To her, it's marking the descent of a mechanical plague upon humanity. But Sir Brain? He looks at that dark expanse and sees his own signature, already written across history. His ego just swells, saluting his gear-driven dominion as an entirely inevitable historical outcome.
All right, on to Section 5, Synthesis, the chosen crack.
Here is the synthesis of our explainer, that inevitable, tragic collision between cold iron and human warmth. This is where the tension just snaps. Sir Brain flat-out rejects Alara's gateway outward. He tells her, "These 4 parables are not warnings to me, they are confirmations. I will keep the tower." He's actively choosing the deterministic prison over her dream of empty benches and ordinary heat. He is doubling down on his sovereignty.
But this is where the profound irony hits. He says, when the clock strikes 12, even gods may crack, but the crack will be mine to choose. Think about that for a second. The mechanical god is literally acknowledging his own dangerous hubris here. He knows that a perfectly rigid system of absolute ice will eventually break. And yet, his need for control is so all-consuming that he insists the destruction of his own divinity must be a product of his sovereign will, rather than just some accident of human drift. That leads us to our final part, Section 6, the Ghost of Humanity. So this chosen crack reveals the ultimate melancholic truth about the Dark Fire. Because in his absolute insistence on controlling his own destruction, a much deeper secret is revealed. Even as Brain claims this unchecked sovereignty over time, the text points out that his fire flares brighten lonely. And this is crucial, because it proves Alara's mechanical nostalgia isn't just some weakness to be stamped out. It is actually the persistent human spirit, a ghost of humanity, trapped deep inside the cold machinery itself. Sir Brain's loneliness is the very human spirit he tried to freeze in absolute ice, still surviving and still haunting the clockwork. And that brings us to a final, really provocative thought to leave you with today. If total perfection demands its own destruction, and if the cold machinery still harbors the lonely ghost of human nostalgia, who truly won the war of the 16th century tower? Was it Sir Brain with his inevitable chosen crack? Or Alara with her unhealed wound of ordinary heat? It's a lot to ponder. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into the Clocktower's dark machinery. And until next time, keep questioning the systems around you.